In this lesson, I'm going to examine the twisting, turning, bizarre chord progressions and songwriting secrets that lie beneath the surface of the song Sweet Charity by the enigmatic, unclassifiable music group Mr. Bungle. This song is off their third studio release, 1999's California. From my understanding, the song was written entirely by singer Mike Patton, and it contains surprisingly advanced chord movement for a composer who never had any formal music theory or composition training. I will show you how to play the chords of the song, but the main point of most of my lessons on my channel here have less to do with here's how to play this song and more about what songwriting devices and music theory principles are at play in the composition and how can you learn from those and maybe incorporate them into your own compositions. Even if the music theory bits are not something the composer was directly conscious of, which I think is largely the case in this song, perhaps if they took more of an intuitive approach and followed their ear, you still have certain principles at work, regardless of whether that's what's in the front of the composer's mind. Let me just say really quickly, please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, and check out my playlist page for videos that you might like the best. Also, I do have a Patreon, High Castle Conservatory, and I'm not going to do a whole spiel on it now, but it's the very, very best way to support my efforts here. So come join my Patreon and become one of my students. This lesson, we do have a special guest. We have my musical partner, Chris Bogen, from the group I work with, High Castle Orchestra. If you haven't heard our album, The Egg That Never Opened, please go check out the deluxe version on Bandcamp. He is going to be showing you how the chords of this song sound on guitar when I cue it up later after this whole intro and I start getting into the chord analysis. Chris is an amazing guitarist. He gets amazing tones, and it's going to be fun to have him on this video here. Now let me give a little background here. Mr. Bungle has four amazing songwriters in the group: Trevor Dunn, Mike Patton, Trey Spruance, and Bear McKinnon, each of whom have their own sort of oddball style of composition, but there is some significant overlap where sometimes one of them sounds kind of like the other. I would chalk that up to probably their common influences, so each one definitely has a unique composition style, but like I said, there is some overlap. Sometimes it's hard to tell which parts of which song were written by who, especially since they had some unorthodox methods of collaboration for their songwriting. From my understanding, a lot of times they would have tapes that they would give to each other of little demos of songs, and they could like take those tapes home and someone might scavenge a part like from someone else's song and kind of use it in their song, and the person who wrote it might go, you just used that one little part, so people weren't always happy with how it turned out, but in the end they kind of surrendered to the song. And that's not a way of writing I've really heard too much of, but I've heard some descriptions of how they would trade these tapes and then pillage each other's parts and rearrange them and repurpose them basically. So that's pretty cool. I do have a connection to this album, Mr. Bungle California. My group, Stratosphere, was on the record label of Mr. Bungle guitarist Trey Spruance. It's Mimicry Records, and the group I had was Stratosphere. Right as they were making this album, California was about the time that I had first met Trey Spruance by hanging around after shows, and then I basically told him, hey, you got to check out this Kurzweil K2500 keyboard. It can do all this stuff with strings and synthesizers and sequence stuff, and eventually I got Trey's number, and I said, hey, you want to borrow my keyboard? And so I lent him the keyboard, and he it's actually right here right now. See this keyboard? This is the actual one that I lent to him. I showed him how to use the sequencers and stuff, and I don't know how long. I think I lent it to him for 3 weeks, and he composed a bunch of the songs that ended up on California, or at least his contributions to the album, on my actual keyboard. They used this keyboard all over the album, the strings, a lot of the synthesizers. There's a ton of other synthesizers, but this Kurzweil K2500 keyboard here is all over that album. And then when they went on tour and tried to adapt this to a 3 keyboard live setup, they hired me And Trey came over to my house for, I think it was at least a week, and we took all these samples that they had gotten from the album and programmed it so that like these 10 keys are an organ and these 5 are a timpani, and then these 10 keys are a glockenspiel, and then when I press this button, all of those turn into something else. It was a wild keyboard setup that was probably the most complicated thing I've ever had to program. And yeah, so that's my connection to the record. So I do have a little bit of insight, not that I'm like an expert on it. This song, Sweet Charity, I believe is 100% written by singer Mike Patton. Mike Patton is the most famous member of Mr. Bungle, as he was in a more famous group, Faith No More, and is known for his wide range of vocal styles, from rock and metal to Italian opera, noise and percussive sounds. He is also known to a large degree for his songwriting contributions to songs from his various bands. Lots of Mr. Bungle songs are some type of collaboration, but this song I do believe is 100% every note Mike Patton, the orchestration, for a rather large Exotica ensemble. I would bet Trey did have a big influence on the production just by having Trey around. He is an amazing producer. I don't think there's any, I don't think there's anyone in Mr. Bungle who quite has the production prowess that Trey does. So just having him in the studio while all these instruments were going undoubtedly played an influence, as well as the other people who all have great ears and their own ideas to add. But this song, as I understand it, is Mike's song. To my knowledge, Mike has no formal music training. He seems to take a more intuitive approach using his ear. One of the things that initially drew me to Mike Patton when I was in high school was his strange sense of outside melody notes in Faith No More and later in Mr. Bungle. Mike, he doesn't seem to intellectualize it like, I'm hitting a major third in the melody over a minor chord, or that's a flat 13 extension over a dominant 7 chord. That's something dorky like I would do. He seems to use his pure ear, and that does have its advantages and disadvantages, but like I said, the advantages are it's really more of an intuitive approach. Mike does exhibit really fantastic musicianship. I think he's underrated in that aspect. Some of his great musicianship is lost in the shock value of so many of his fans love the crazy stuff he does, and I do too. Megaphones and CB radios and 8-octave range, as YouTube proclaims, as operatic Italian vocals and soundtracks, dark twisted lyrics, and a schizophrenic range of vocal styles not usually covered by your average rock vocalist, or really any vocalist. The unusual chord tones in his vocal melodies, his amazing rhythm, the diversity of vocal timbres, including using the voice as an instrument instead of just singing, percussive, things that just are sounds, and he blends into the instruments basically at times, especially on Disco Volante, the Mr. Bungle album. And he has an impeccable sense of pitch, really outstanding pitch. It makes me a little bit jealous because my pitch is okay, but his is really, really good pitch. Mike's unschooled approach makes for a very interesting chord progression analysis because Mike probably unknowingly breaks all the harmonic rules of pop songwriting and relies on unconventional chord movements to push this song forward. Mike Patton has some crazy fanboys, and I don't quite consider myself one of those because I don't love every single project he does equally. I really like Mr. Bungle. Mr. Bungle, to me, is the perfect mix where Mike gets to sing on top of a production that's heavily influenced by the other people, and especially Trace Bruins, who I believe is the best producer and visionary producer in the group, who has his sort of sonic imprint, I think, on most of the stuff Mr. Bungle does. So when Trey and Mike get together, to me, magic happens. I like Faith No More a lot in certain, not everything they do, and some of Mike's other projects, but Mr. Bungle to me is absolutely where it's at with this combination of musicians. So let me give you a quick intro to my chord analysis chart. To get the most out of this lesson, follow along with the keyboard if you can. The guitar's okay, but the keyboard you'll actually see me playing the chords and how to voice them. The chord analysis chart is pretty simple. When there's a sun, that's a new key. So anytime a sun hits, it's a new key, and then the Roman numerals tell us what function each particular chord has of the key we happen to be in now. You'll see section names. Over to the right, you're even going to see if there's a number, that means it's an oddball grouping of bars. So the average bars are the average. In most pop and regular music, it's groups of 4 bars. When you start mixing in a group of 3 once in a while, or a group of 5, or a group of 2, or 6 or whatever it is, that's when you start having interesting song structures and song arrangements that add a little bit of spice to it from the typical 4 bars of this, 4 bars of that, or 8 bars of this, 8 bars of that. This song has a very odd song structure or form or arrangement, whatever you want to call it. It's not just verse, chorus, solo, chorus, bridge, whatever. There is a chorus which deceptively varies between the first time it's introduced and then every other time, that the ear almost just thinks, oh, that's the same part, but we'll get to that when we get to it. And there's a one-time verse that starts in the beginning or after the intro and then only really comes back as a variation, which I call the verse reprise, but that's pretty odd. Usually there's multiple verses in a song, but there's lots of bridges, or I don't know what else to call them, interlude, transition, segue. You can get creative with naming song sections. This is anything but an AABA song structure or any of the typical song structures that rock and pop music exhibit. When I was trying to name the parts of this song, it was a bit of a struggle. When you're sitting there and you're not sure, is this a verse? It's definitely not a verse. It's definitely not a chorus. What else is it? It's a bridge. It's a this. It's a that. So the harder it is to name different sections where it's not obviously, a bridge or a verse, that gives you an idea of how uncommon the song arrangement really is. So this song is all over the place with a very, very unusual song form. So hats off to Mike Patton for this song form. There is a huge Exotica influence to the production of this song and just the aesthetic and the vibe of the recording. They recorded this song famously to, I think it was at least 2 24-track, Studer, professional 24-track machines, and this was the last time they did music directly to tape, and it was, made the production much more difficult, but the sound was very good. Yeah, the Exotica influence on this album, it almost seems to take its cue from some of the greats. I'm not sure what specifically they were thinking of, but, Martin Denny or Arthur Lyman, Les Baxter, Henry Mancini. It's especially exotic because of the prominent, Hawaiian-sounding pedal steel guitar and the wider range of, real percussion, generous amounts of, preamp overdrive when needed, or the willingness to use a lot of reverb. They would, instead of clean reverb, they would opt for, in this California album, dingy, noisy, a spring reverb unit called the Furman RV1. It's a pretty noisy unit, but it's got a ton of vibe to it. Spring has that, surf guitar sound, but I'm shocked they made a hi-fi album using a ton of this reverb, not because it's not a great sounding reverb, but it's just a pretty noisy unit, and they would really compress it and drive it hard at times. So they would pick spots, like one instrument would be drenched in the reverb and some other instrument would be completely dry. So they had a very good sense of which instruments to imbue with that grungy Furman RV1 spring reverb. I have a unit right there. Lots of exotic percussion also, guiros, timpanis, mouth pops through the spring reverb, rim shots that are run through that spring reverb, tubular bells, human mouth sounds, hand drums, wood blocks, tempo, cabasso, all kinds of stuff, harpsichords. Yeah, as far as the actual non-percussive instruments, the drums are percussive, but you have not a rock band, but you have drums, and you definitely have, I think, electric bass. I don't hear any stand-up bass in this song. I could be wrong. Harpsichord, electric guitar chords, electric surf guitar kind of doubling the bass at times. There's acoustic guitar, string sections, which I don't think are real string sections in this case. Not that Mr. Bungle didn't sometimes do real string sections, but this is my keyboard and the high cinematic strings blasted through that spring reverb. But it's a pretty cool aesthetic. You would be, it doesn't sound like a real orchestra, but they really did a great job of using, Kurzweil's synthetic string sounds and making it have this really high, very compressed spring reverb vibe. There's an amazing timpani part. There's a French horn and the glockenspiel or celesta, or maybe those two together. It's probably a piano. I can't hear it specifically. There's a harpsichord for sure. There's background vocals. There's a little bit of a choir at one point. Not too much, but just one point toward the end. A bass clavinet on the chorus and a whistle in the intro. Yeah, Exotica, I think, would be one of the main influences for the production of this song, and they pull it off really well. Like I said before, this song has pretty wild chord progressions that are hard to place in a specific key. I will try, but don't give me too hard of a time that, how could you have called that part in G major? The way this song goes, it doesn't tether itself very specifically to a key at times. It's kind of a little bit slutty as far as its key associations at times, which is part of this composition style that Mike was going for, which I'll explain in a little bit here. Mr. Bungle is a pretty intense band. You know, their first album is like psycho funk clown metal, really pulled off well, but it's psycho funk clown metal. The second album, Disco Volante, is one of the most abstract, amazing pieces of art ever, but it's not an easy listen by any stretch. It's very abrasive at times, an absolute work of art, which is not something we're used to music being so artistic. Some people, it turns them off, but if you give that album a shot. But their third album, California, is by far the most listenable album, and this song, Sweet Charity, might be the most listenable song Mr. Bungle has ever done. There's no metal, no screaming, no significant noise transitions. It's just very listenable. So I think that's awesome. This song does have a bit of a musical vibe, like an old school soundtrack to a Broadway musical. It uses a composition style that could be labeled as Pandiatonicism, what you would hear with artists like Serge Gainsbourg. There's a dystopian theme to the lyrics. It seems to be very much about California, but I don't really want to get into the lyrics here. I don't want to. A lot of my videos, I interpret them. I don't really feel the need to in this song. I'm going to stick to mostly just the music. Great engineering. This was an album financed by Warner Brothers. From what I understand, this album cost a couple $100,000. They would hire the musicians that they didn't have available in their band. You know, if they needed the timpani player or the French horn player, they would hire them all. They used great studios and they had really good engineers. So, like I said before, there's times where they use insane amounts of reverb and they know which tracks should be dry and wet. They use a lot of preamp gain where you can get a subtle distortion or overdrive or that tube type of sound, overdriving on specific tracks to give the certain instruments a little bit more of an edge and kind of stand out in the recording. Obviously, great mic choices come with great engineers, as were on this record, and they had really nice room spacing on certain sounds, like the drums when needed, and it's not just a one-dimensional, it's a really 3D type of sound that they got on this production. And the studio musicianship of the band itself and their hired guns are really, really top-notch. Props to Mr. Bungle for pulling off this massive analog production. There is what's in my mind a legendary timpani part played by William Wynant, who's a frequent percussionist that records with Mr. Bungle and is a sort of a legend on his own in this whole scene of musicians. But the timpani part, it's not necessarily that it's so complex, but groove-wise, it just interacts with the drums and the drum fills that make it sound like it's almost one instrument. In a way, it's totally futile for me to go over the chord changes and harmonic movement for each chord and show which key that it may be associated with. I know there's a certain degree of futility to that because this song is so plastic in its association with keys, but I feel it is useful for me to try to at least pigeonhole it into a key where I can, just to kind of show you the movement that it's taking. I will freely tell you when a part is simply not able to be hemmed into a certain key, but I think there's some vague associations here that are worth noting, and I'm sure I'm going to hear it in the comments of you shouldn't even think of this in that key. I get that. I get all those things, but I still find value in trying. Like I said, I do know some of the guys in this group, so I was recently messaging with Trey Spruance, the guitar player, and he made me aware of a term for the compositional style, one that I probably should have already known, that he called Pandiatonicism. Trey is really a fountain of knowledge and wisdom and can make you known about all kinds of things you never even knew existed. If you haven't heard his group, the Secret Chiefs 3, which I've had the pleasure of recording with on certain occasions and touring with before, one of the most unique groups in the world, so go check out some of their albums, Book of Horizons, Book M, there's a bunch of albums, but if you haven't heard them before, yeah. So Trey was nice enough to give me a little insight into this song. So before I read to you what he told me, a little background. The term Pandiatonicism was coined by Nicholas Slominski in the second edition of his Music Since 1900 to describe chord formations of any number up to all 7 degrees of the diatonic scale, used freely in democratic equality. Triads with added notes, such as the 6th, 7th, or 2nd degrees, are the most common, while the most elementary form is a non-harmonic bass. Does that mean bass notes that aren't in the root, maybe? Pandiatonicism sanctions the simultaneous use of any or all 7 tones of the diatonic scale, with the bass determining the harmony. Pandiatonic music typically uses the diatonic notes freely in dissonant combinations without conventional resolutions or without standard chord progressions, but always with a strong sense of tonality due to the absence of chromatics. Pandiatonicism possesses both tonal and modal aspects, with a distinct preference for major keys. The functional importance of the primary triads remains undiminished in pandiatonic harmony. Some composers who use this would be Ravel, Hindemith, Copeland. It's also employed in jazz as well, and in Henry Cowell's tone clusters. So I was asking Trey when I was texting with him about Sweet Charity and what Mike was thinking and what insight he could give me into this, and he said, non-functional pandiatonicism was everywhere in the golden era of the 60s and 70s that Mike was evoking with Sweet Charity. With the right orchestration, you can kind of make anything work, but if you're pointing to an era, even a strata of society, show tunes, fake cool jazz influenced by cool rock, you got to work in those languages. That's what was happening there. He says, Patton intuited that vibe really well on Sweet Charity. I knew exactly the vibe he was going for. Bob Fosse, who directed a movie actually called Sweet Charity, I think in 1969, and some of it was pretty amazing. It's kind of that fake, shitty, show tune jazz thing, but it's not like Cy Coleman, the composer of that soundtrack, was some kind of slouch. Exactly. This is not Trey talking here, but back in those days, even the generic, crappy stuff was like an amazing composer, arranger for a real big band or whatever it was. So yeah, you can't call these guys, like he said, some slouch. Then he says, but he was Manciniing it. I like that verb, Henry Manciniing it. But Patton is coming at it from another way. Put it all together and it's like Serge Gainsbourg with Jean-Claude Vanier. I think it's a French composer. So yeah, thanks to Trey for a little insight there. Because of the pandiatonicism, please take my interpretations of the key determinations with a huge grain of salt. Often it's futile to a degree, but I think there is some way to tie it to certain keys, and it's worth noting. All right, so let's get into this song. It starts simply enough with an intro. Kind of an exotic intro with its instrumentation of the Hawaiian pedal steel guitar and the whistling and the spring reverb and the percussion and mouth pops. Very nice exotic intro. The birds that started off on that California beach. But the intro hits a G major 7. We're not sure what key we're in yet, if any. But as a general rule of thumb, 9 times out of 10, I would say when you start on a major chord, you're in that key. G major 7. So yeah, it's basically just a vamp on G major 7 with a little chromatic slide down. Now that thing right there, it's not really a chord change. It's this technique where if you want to make something sound like it's melting, you play a chord a half step below it and then come back up to the chord. So in this case, it's really just hitting a F sharp major 7 over G and then back to a G major 7. So anytime you want to just melt a little, you can go to the major chord half step below where you're at. That's a general device you can use. As where we have a guest guitarist on this video, Chris Bogen. He's going to show you how this intro sounds on his real nice sounding guitar. So there's not a super easy way to determine the key except just assuming it's in G major. We don't really have any other information to go on except for looking ahead. Sometimes you look to where a song's going to give you a clue of where you may be. So the verse is in B minor. And it kind of makes a non-diatonic use of something in B minor. But an easy way to think of that would be our intros in G major. And our verse goes to the 3 of G major. And our verse would go to the 3 of G major, which would be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So G, A, B would be the 3 of G, and it's B minor. So both of those chords would also be in the key of D major, but I don't have any compelling reason to call this in D major. So I'm going to call our intro in G major. There's that melty trick where you just go, a lot of times the bass note the same or go up to its 5th, whatever, but do a major 7 chord or a major chord from a half step below your destination. In this case, the G major 7 is the destination. So if we use this technique of looking ahead to the verse goes up to B minor, which is kind of like 3 of G. Well, it's not kind of like, it is 3 of G. Or you could call it, G from a B minor perspective. You could call it a modulation to B minor, which I'm going to do here, or you could just consider it still in G, and it's in that, B minor perspective from the 3 of G. We'll note that some of the sounds on this intro are very drenched in that firm and spring reverb, the mouth pops, the rim shot of the drums, the pedal steel guitar. There's also like an electric bass, and I think there's a whistling melody going along with the pedal steel. We also have mouth pops through spring reverb, this kind of thing. That's something I got from listening to Mr. Bungle California, was how to do those mouth pops, because the mouth pops on California were really sort of an impression of a Beach Boys type of percussion sound. I think the drum solo or the percussion solo for the song Pet Sounds was like a Sparkletts water bottle, like through the echo chamber or whatever. But as far as making the mouth pop sound that's on the Mr. Bungle California record, I didn't see it get made, but I did hear that they were definitely using Furman Spring Reverb. I have an emulation right here on this Altiverb plugin, which is pretty good. I have another good Spring Reverb plugin by Audio Thing now called Springs, which is fantastic, which I didn't have it at this time, but I might have used it. Besides that, on the for the mouth pop instrument, you have to use your mouth and do a low sound, which would be made by and then a high sound would be by stretching it. And you got to play this like a drum. And when that little water drop sound hits that spring reverb, something magic happens. Let me show you the mouth pops track here. First thing I have on it is some EQ. You can see what I'm doing. This isn't very much bass. So I wanted to bring up, 100, 200, 300 to make a nice little bass sound. Let's try it without it so we hear what it sounds like. You can just see it lacks that bass in that drum sound. Next plugin I have is a Kramer Pi, which is some kind of old compressor they used in some famous rock records. I'm not sure, Jimi Hendrix, I'm not sure who it was, but it's kind of an obscure piece, but it has a cool little compression sound. And this is such an uneven, dynamic. It's just going to need a lot of compression, probably more than just that. We have an EQ, which is a Neve, and I'm not even really using the preamp. Cool thing about Neve preamps, though, is you can drive them and get analog distortion like this. In this case, I didn't really need it. I'm just using the high end a little bit. These high end EQs on the Neves are nice. Listen. Pretty easy to find that sweet spot on that one. Then I'm using a saturation. I did this so long ago. I don't know why I just didn't use the saturation on this Neve. Maybe I like this one better. This one's from Softtube, and it's free, I think, or at least it was. And I can get a nice analog saturation sound. Okay, here's without it. And you can see it just adds this warmth. Then I do another Neve. See, I honestly don't know what I was thinking. I'm going to try to justify this. On this one, I still didn't do any preamp gain. I left it at 0, but I did do some rolling off of that low mid. Maybe I did too much on this EQ. But this Neve low mid EQ is really nice. I find that to fit things in the mix, a lot of times I'm having to cut right there at about 220. That sounds pretty good. Then I put a limiter on it just because the dynamics are still so all over the place. And for some reason, I put 1176 just to catch any peaks that weren't caught already. This might be totally superfluous, but... And the thing is, you can just kiss that just a little so it catches those bigger spikes. Now check out this Furman. This has got such a cool character, this Furman spring reverb. So to recreate that Mr. Bungle mouth pop sound from the California album, I think it's a chain that would be something like that. And obviously there's a lot of variations you could do with that. But this sounds pretty cool. And to me, it definitely mimics a Brian Wilson type percussion sound from Pet Sounds. So coming out of the intro, I will show you this transition. So B minor is the first chord of the verse, and leading up to it, it goes. So if we were in G, right, that's kind of like going D7 to B minor. But there's no telling what this is. I think it's just a lead-in to the B minor. But you could consider it like a 5 of B minor, F sharp 7 to B minor. And, you know, if it's F sharp 7, shouldn't it be... There's this rule of bass that you can kind of get away with murder. To the point where even if you have a major chord, like an F sharp major chord, or an F sharp 7 chord, the bass note should be the major third. But you can actually do a minor third over it and it's not going to sound bad. Let me demonstrate that for you. Here's F sharp 7. And if I didn't do that A, I would make it an A sharp. But that's a little too predictable. F sharp 7. Kind of adds a funkiness, a bluesiness to it. So they're not doing an F sharp 7 in this case. It just goes straight from the G major 7. It's not like it goes... But it's kind of implied is what I'm getting at. So leading out of the last 2 bars of the intro, going into the verse. Now we're at the verse, so we're in B minor. And I'm going to call this a change to B minor. I keep us in major keys a lot of times, but this is indisputably minor. There's the chords of the verse. Really cool chords, Mike. Check out this. And the first chorus. But anyway, our verse is in B minor. Let's listen to what this sounds like on the guitar, Mr. Chris Bogen. So the verse has a bar structure of 4 bars, 4 bars, and then 3 bars with a bit of a fermata on that C5. And a fermata is when you just kind of pause the rhythm, and it would be like a conductor tells you when to start again. It's a hold for either a brief period of time, or sometimes it can be a longer period of time. And I like the flexibility of that fermata, that little bird's eye symbol over the C5. So let's listen to the verse with the vocals, and you can just hear the melody coming out of that intro. Set me the heavens open, the storm is over, so let's stop the parade. Raindrops kneel down the laughter, forever after, in the technicolor heartbeat in the say that it helps you forget everything. Sweet Saralee, butter, sweet Gerald, butter, getting ahead of ourselves here. So yeah, the verse goes to B minor, and it starts with a simple 1 to 5 in B minor. And 1 to 5 simple would be going 1, which is B minor, to F sharp, which is 5. But it takes its right to do a different bass note, and instead it makes it over its major third, which gives it a falling motion. Listen to the difference of B minor, F sharp, now with F sharp with A sharp in the bass, and then it leads down to the magical flat 7. If you haven't heard my spiel on magical flat 7 in both major and minor keys offers this great point of flexibility where you can do a major chord there, you can do another minor chord there, in major or in minor. It's crazy. You can do either major or minor from both major and minor keys between 1 and flat 7. So in this case, we're in B minor, flat 7 would be A minor. It almost feels like it's dropping into A minor for a second, but it goes right back up to B minor. So I'm not going to call that a key change. What I'm going to call that is 1 of B minor. Then you have 5 with that alternate bass note. Now you have flat 7. Remember, it can be major or minor. Right back up to 1. 5 with the major third in the bass. Flat 7 as a minor chord, A minor. Stay on that A minor. Now what this is a diminished chord, but it's functioning as 5 of B minor, right? And a dominant 7, F sharp dominant 7, flat 9 is basically a diminished chord with a different bass note. So like F sharp 7 and then a diminished chord is how you make that chord. And it doesn't resolve to B minor, which is the really interesting thing. It resolves to, I don't know what you call that. There's some name for it in theory where it's a half step above. So if we're expecting B minor, we're expecting this, right? But we do this thing where instead you go up a half step, which is a device I've used all throughout my songwriting career or whatever you want to call it. But don't resolve to the 1. Instead go up a half step, and it kind of leaves you feeling suspended. So let's listen to how that plays out. Let's take it from the second half of the verse. Raindrop around the laughter, forever after, in the technicolor heartbeat. 5, and they say that it helps you forget everything. Right there, it's suspending a half step above where we were, which is B minor. It's here. It's here. Then it wants to drop to here. So yeah, the verse is pretty cool. 1, 5, and then a flat 7 minor twice. 1, 5, flat 7 minor. Stay in that flat 7 minor. Then a variation of 5. Then go to the flat 2. Get everything. So yeah, whenever I have a dominant 7 flat 9 chord like I do here in this F sharp 7 flat 9 over C sharp, I like the students to know that it's really just a diminished 7 chord. In fact, there's no F sharp in the bass, but it's functioning as. Whenever I can have a diminished chord that functions more as a dominant chord, because we've told you before that diminished chords and dominant 7 chords are very close to each other. There's literally only one note difference. So yeah, a strange chord progression, a really nice chord progression from Mike to go 1, fall with the 5 and the alternate bass note, then a flat 7 minor, which is really moody and non-diatonic. Again. Into that 5 or the diminished 7 chord, and then up a half step, flat 2. Get everything, which wants to fall back to 1. Sweet charity. And it does fall back to 1 for the first chorus, or what did I call that? Yeah, chorus 1. So the verse to Sweet Charity is the perfect example of the oddball notes that Mike Patton uses in the melody that really fall very much outside of the chords at times, which adds that sort of tension that I think a lot of us like from his melodies. The verse, send me the heavens are open, the storm is over, so let's stop the parade. Right there. Gosh, it was in B minor. It does 1, B minor, then 5, F sharp over A sharp, then A minor, which is like flat 7 of B minor. It's like a non-diatonic. But over that A minor, he does the notes. The A minor should be A, C, E. I'll voice it like this. He goes in the voice. Let's stop the parade. It could not be more dissonant. It's very strange. It almost sounds to me like another chord was supposed to be there. And that's actually a pretty cool device. And I think I know which chord it's implying, but Mike just kind of sits pat on that A minor. So I want you to listen to that Let's Stop the Parade of how every single note, not every single note. Listen to that harmony, because it's clashing with the C in the A minor chord. And that sounds, on a vocal, it's not going to sound as dissonant as that will on a piano. Let's hear that one more time. Save me, the heavens are open, the storm is over, so let's stop the parade. So, like I said, it sounds like it's implying a different chord. And I think it would be, we're in B minor, so take a guess what it might be. Storm is over. How about 5 of B minor, F sharp, and so let's stop the parade. That to me is what it sounds like it's implying. So that is a cool little device for you right there, is you could make a chord progression and then you could literally take out a chord that is supposed to support a melody and stay on the chord you were on and just let the dissonance kind of build up there. Say me the heavens are open, the storm is over, so let's stop the parade. Oh my God. That makes no sense at all, but it sounds fantastic. That is kind of a Mike Patton's melodic language in a nutshell, at least at times. When that chord progression dumps you off a half step above the root in that C5. Anytime you have a 5 chord, it means there's no major third, there's no minor third in it. It's just like a power chord. On a guitar it'd be like that, but on a piano you can voice it differently. It's a power chord, and a power chord is ambiguous because it doesn't have a major or minor. It's just forget everything, and then it falls back to 1. Sweet charity. And then what it does on the chorus is interesting because it's the same chord progression at first as the verse. Forget everything. Sweet charity. Bo-ba-ba, ha, bo-ba-ba, ha, bo-ba-ba, So that's what I call chorus 1. And what is remarkable about chorus 1 is that it sounds very much like the rest of the choruses. In fact, later on I just call it chorus 2, and I think chorus 3 and chorus 4, they come back to back. Chorus 1 is actually different chord progression than the rest of it, because you have this sweet cherub town. But every other chorus you have sweet cherub town. This. So, every other chorus has that actually different chord progression, but I swear I listened to this song 50 times and it never struck me that chorus 1 was different than chorus 2, 3, and 4. Fundamentally different, but they have a similar sound because of all the and the sweet. They both say sweet cherub town, the other one sweet cherub town. So let's listen to the chords of chorus 1 from guitarist Chris Bogen. So the chords of chorus 1 start the same as the chords of verse 1. Sweet cherub town, bo ba ba, ha bo ba ba, ha bo ba ba, ha. Sweet cherub town, bo ba ba, ha bo ba ba, ha bo ba ba. Then the difference. So that's going from chorus 1 to what I call a suspense interlude, and it kind of drops off onto an E5 chord or an E power chord, or in other words, an E with no major or no minor. Yeah, that suspense interlude uses some very high strings from my Kurzweil keyboard, this actual keyboard played on the record, just these really high reverbed out string holds in fifths. And then there's some drum that almost sounds like it's in fifths. But that's not the bass, that's like a drum that's like 2 beats at the end before what I call the poison bridge, where it finally defines a major instead of a minor. So, second half of the chorus, we're in B minor. Now, A minor. Let's consider ourselves back in G. Flat 2. Then G sus4 is basically a major chord with a raised third. So it's like sus that wants to fall to regular major chord. But so there we're back home in G. Just like we started the song, right? So second half of the chorus. Sweet cherub town, B minor. F sharp is 5 of that. Now let's consider ourselves in G. 2. Flat 2. 1 with the sus4. Now do the climb down from 1 to 6. Now the weirdest part about this suspense interlude from a compositional point of view, when you hear this, even though I'm not hearing a major third here or a minor third, when you hear this, it's 1/6 in major. You know I'll always love you till the end, babe, even though I know it's not the never. So that whenever I hear this, I'm on G and I hear, my ear fills in the blank of E minor because of that 1/6 connection. So you may not feel the same. You may feel they dropped off from this ambiguous E5 chord, but in my ears I hear, and on that whole suspense interlude with the really high strings and the whoops, the last two beats I think are Exotica percussion. And then it goes to the Poison bridge, which finally defines this E5 chord that I told you felt like an E minor chord or a 6 chord in G. And it finally defines it as major, or in my view, it switches from that implied minor to major, which is always a good move. To take a minor key you're in and then just suddenly become major. I know there's more ambiguity here because that E5 chord leads to E major. It may have been E major the whole time. If you can add ambiguity into your composition somehow, that is a good thing. And adding 5 chords or power chords, 2-note chords like E5 is one great way to add some ambiguity. So nice job on Patton for falling out of the chorus. Back to 1, and then down to 6. 4 bars of that. I think 2 beats of the Exotica percussion. Major. Drink your poison from a cup of gold. Your gift keeps on giving and giving. Perfect photographs on every days and postcards. So yeah, the suspense interlude, which has these real legato high strings in perfect fifth harmonies like this, just reinforcing that ambiguity, becomes E major because you can hear it in the strings. It finally comes in, and even the melody goes, drink your poison from a cup of gold, your gift keeps on. So it almost turns it into an E dominant chord there. Gift keeps on, right? It's not quite major, which is that. Gift keeps on giving. So the song form from chorus, as chorus 1 is 4 bars, same chords as the verse, then 6 bars, which dumps out into suspense interlude, which is 4 bars, and the last 2 beats of that suspense interlude are the exotic percussion. Then the poison bridge, which suddenly switches to E major. Drink your poison from... It's just 4 bars. Oh, no. It's 3 bars. Drink your poison from a cup of gold. Your gift keeps on giving. And giving. Perfect photographs, Mount Everest days and postcard nights. Tearing through the paper walls of time with sunset eyes. So the poison bridge is 3 bars, and it's real melty, and there's no drums or keeping tempo, but the voice keeps tempo, I guess you could say. Drink your poison from a cup of gold. Your gift keeps on giving. Total exotic transition to what I call lounge transition, which is a 5-bar phrase, which is pretty cool. So it goes... out of the poison bridge, your gift keeps on giving and giving. 5th bar, break, lap steel or pedal steel. I call this photograph bridge, and there's a real flexibility to the tempo here, folks. Go listen to the original, and I want you to understand what a great thing it is to not always have a click track that's exactly in time. Instead, you have more of like a conductor. That's what a conductor does, right? Is they add all these subtleties into the tempo and the dynamics and all this stuff. But even if you think of conductor as only tempo maps, and it's good for you to be able to get stretchy with the tempo at times. And bands, playing live together can look at each other and slow down and speed up. But when you're recording and you got to lay out all these bars in your little computer program, it gets a little more difficult to intuit what like a good tempo is. But I think they did a really nice job on this, what I call a photograph bridge, which is a 5-bar phrase, of making the tempo really plastic or really not seem like it's right on the money. So from the Poison bridge, you have drink your poison from a cup of gold. Your gift keeps on giving and giving. Photograph bridge, perfect photograph, Mount Everest days and postcard nights. 2-bar phrase, tearing through the paper walls of time. It's the time bridge, what I call it. Grand Canyon halls, you numb your mind with gloves of white and turpentine. Even the bombs and scarecrows are saying, do, sweet Timothy. Chorus 2 there. So let's take it back a little bit. So when that lounge transition comes in, it's a cool little like glockenspiel, or I think they would use glockenspiel and celesta together. That's what it sounds like to me, because it sounds like a larger than life bell, and that's a very cool wall of sound combo to have. Is to anytime you have a glock part, just add a celesta part to it, or vice versa. And also, don't copy one MIDI part to another. Actually perform it twice, so there's a little tiny flam between them, which gives that sort of realistic vibe. So one of the coolest moves you can do in music is to go a tritone away from where you are. And so they're in E major, drink your poison from a cup of gold, and their tritone away would be B flat. I can't explain why now, but a tritone is the antithesis of music. If you have an octave, a tritone divides it apart. It provides the greatest dissonance possible that wants to be resolved up to that perfect fifth. But anyway, harmonic movements tend to be very interesting if you can work a tritone into it. So when it goes from E major on the Poison bridge to the lounge transition that goes B flat major 7 to C major 9 or C major 7. Now, some of you may know that there's no such thing as a key that has 2 major 7 chords that are a whole step apart, such as B flat major 7 to C major 7. There is no key that has that. So what key are we actually in, since there's no key that has that? And the trick is here that we're in C major. I've talked already in this song about that magical flat 7 from any key. It's not diatonic to the key. In other words, it's not actually in the key. But anytime you're in any key, you can always go to the flat 7 and play a major chord, a minor chord, a dominant chord. It has all this flexibility in both major and minor. So what's actually happening here, and there's a clue in the glockenspiel melody. And give. Right there, it gives a clue what key we're in, because it doesn't go. It actually goes A, which is major 7, E is sharp 11, G is 6, D is 3, then C major 7 or C major 9, then. So yeah, we are temporarily in C major there, and we're doing a flat 7 to 1. Your gift keeps on giving. Break. So yeah, that's another thing. When I was trying to figure out what key we were in, remember the look ahead method? I said B flat major 7 to C major 9 or C major 7. Those are both the same, with just a different extension. C major 7 is this. C major 9 is this. Just adds an extra note. That's it. So I looked ahead to that photograph bridge with all those fermatas, and I see that it's a simple 4, 3, 2, 1 in C major. So that made it even more clear to me that this lounge transition was in C major. Flat 7 to 1. Then the break is a 1 climbing up to 4 with the pedal steel. 4, perfect photo. 3, graphs on Everest. 2, days and postcard nights. F major 9. 10 through the paper walls of time with sunset eyes. Till the thorns Grand Canyon home. Numb your mind with gloves of white and turpentine. Even the bombs and scarecrows will sing. Do, 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 sweet Charity. So that gets us into chorus 2, which, as I said before, is fundamentally different than chorus 1, even though it has the same vibes, because it sings sweet charity and goes ha. But the chord progressions are different, the way that they work their way around. Actually, very different. So that photograph bridge really is nice with what I put as all those fermatas and the flexibility of the tempo. Perfect photographs, Mount Everest days and postcard nights. Tearing through the paper walls of time with sunset eyes. Telephone, Grand Canyon Hall. So we get to that thing called the time bridge, and it's very crazy because I'm calling us still in G, but I don't even know. I'm not even going to go too much time into it. It's doing all this chromatic movement that is hard to classify, really. I'm calling it all in G, which might seem absolutely ludicrous to some of you because G flat 7 is not in G. F major 7 is not in G. It's that flat 7 thing. Then we finally get up to G. G flat is not in G. And then we're back to F major 7. E augmented to E major. That's like a 6 major of G. And finally 5. And then change keys to D flat. So So that Pandiatonicism, I think, is really coming into play there. But what's more coming into play is that Mike has taken one of the main themes of the song, the Sweet Charity, and then morphed it into something else in the melody. So let's listen to Before Time Bridge, and I want you to listen pretty much to how that is a variation. I want you to listen to how Mike's melody on this time bridge is a variation of that theme of Sweet Charity, but it totally makes it its own thing as well for the time bridge. Through the paper walls of time with sunset eyes, telephones, Grand Canyon hearts, you numb your mind with gloves of white and turpentine. Going to D major, even the bombs and scarecrows will sing. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do, Sweet Charity. So that's chorus 2 there. I want to talk a little bit about the theme for this song, the melodic theme. Themes are so important. They get stated, they get brought back in various ways, and there's so many things that the theme does for us. The way the theme strikes me in this one, and sometimes it can be a little subjective, but I do think it's the chorus. And it's divided up among the lead vocal that says, Sweet Charity, and then the bass vocal goes, bo, 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 and the lead vocal, ah. Then the bass vocal, bo, 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 then the lead vocal, ah. And the bass vocal, bo, 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 and the lead, ah. So if you look what's happening right there, it's going, Sweet Charity, bo, 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 and then instead of bo, the bass doesn't finish, it goes up an octave to that F sharp. Bo, 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 ah. It does that little bend on the soprano of the vocal. So just taking a theme and just divides it up, and it is an octave jump there, but it still sounds good. Sweet Charity, bo, 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 ah. Bo, 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 ah. Bo, 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 ah. Sweet Charity. And then we hear that in the choruses, and chorus 1 is different from every other chorus that happens, even though they have a pretty similar vibe. But the first time we actually hear the theme is kind of a little bit on the subtle side. I'm sure most of you Mr. Bungle fans have heard it, but it comes in the verse. And the instrument Mike decides to state the melody in the verse behind the vocal melody, kind of a subtle, almost subconscious thing, is a French horn. And a French horn, can be a very mellow, dark instrument, if it's not blaring loud in its dynamic range, if you're just kind of hitting in the middle. So the verse goes one time without that French horn. Save me, the heavens are open, the storm is over, so let's stop the parade. Right here. Rain, boom, 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 boom. So there it is, and it doesn't divide up like in the chorus when I said it did, like Sweet Charity, divide the bass, bo, 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 then high note. This time it just lets the French horn play it. So raindrops, it goes rain, boom, in the French horn. So let's do a French horn sound. So like. And yeah, it's behind all those strings and vocals and surf guitars and acoustic guitars, and it blends in and states the melody, subconsciously before our ear really knows the melody, which is later in the chorus. But this makes for really nice listening to have the melody stated, as a subconsciously almost, because a French horn is this. And I think they do a fair amount of reverb on there, so it sounds like I know it's a real musician that they got to play it. It's really hard to, do a fake instrument on a French horn. I mean, this sounds fine. Raindrops on the laughter, So yeah, really nice. And the theme really goes for a wild ride on that time bridge. When it goes tearing through the paper walls of time with sunset eyes, Ellen thoughts, Grand Canyon heights. So that melody is very similar to Sweet Charity and to the theme, although it's totally different. It's not doing Sweet Charity. It's just kind of connecting the separated parts of what was the main theme and then running it through a completely different chord progression. So one way you can tell is if I just take the lyric Sweet Charity and instead of singing the correct lyrics, what if I just sing Sweet Charity so you can hear, oh, that is that same melody over and over and over. Tearing through the paper walls of time, sweet charity, sweet charity, sweet charity, sweet charity, sweet charity, sweet charity. So yeah, that time bridge is a very nice variation on the melody. So it's going to change keys suddenly right before the second chorus. So it finally goes to that D major, which is 5 of G. It goes down a half step, turns it dominant, which is like 4 of A flat. And then E flat is 5 of A flat. C is 3 major of E flat. But it's almost doing that, making it seem like we're going in E flat major to C minor. But you see from the chorus, the F minor, it's really doing A flat because F minor is the 6 of A flat, or its relative minor. So chorus 2 is a real variation of chorus 1. It sounds very similar, has all the same type of vibes, but the harmonic progression is a little different. Let's hear that on the guitar, Chris. So going into chorus 2, one of the interesting things is that we change keys compared to the first chorus, but there's something real subtle that's happening here. It goes, sweet charity. And if you'll recall, in the first chorus, we were in B minor, and the notes were 1, 3, 4, 5 of B minor. But if you go to the second chorus, F minor, the notes are not 1, 3, 4, 5 of F minor, which would be sweet charity. It's actually 5, 7, 1, 9. So it's actually changing the theme by re-harmonizing it. Where instead of, B minor was 1, 3, 4, 5. What we have now is when we get to the second chorus of F minor, it's 5, 7, 1, 9 instead of 1, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you might not have appreciated that distinction. I surely never did until I plotted out the notes and I was like, oh, those are different notes of the chord. And then, like I said, the chord progression is different as well. So I want to take us from the time bridge into the chorus. Tear through the paper walls of time with sunset eyes and with thorns, Grand Canyon holds you, numb your mind with gloves of white. Here comes D major, which is 5 of G. Even the bombs now change keys. D flat, scarecrows will sing. That C right there might just be a C5. I can't really tell. I think it's a C major, but the main movement of E flat to C would be an E flat major. But it is also a function of A flat major for you to be able to go 5 to 3. And then the chorus is clearly in F minor, which is the relative minor of A flat major. So I'm going to call this lead up part to the chorus switching to A flat major. Bombs and scarecrows are saying. We have an odd bar structure there of 5 bars leading into this chorus. So this, if you are not sufficiently impressed with this song arrangement so far, with it is just absolutely wild. And make sure you've actually listened to the song. I know you Bungle fans have, but if you haven't, go give the song a few spins before you go into this lesson. You could almost imagine that this chorus was in D flat major. Why? Because F minor is 3 and G flat major is 4 and B flat minor is 6. One problem. Sweet cherub. G natural. In the key of D flat, there is no G natural. So that the melody excluded us from being in D flat major. Even though I thought we'd found a clever way to say that the chords were in, D flat major. I think they're more closely because of the melody to be in. We are in F minor or A flat major. So coming out of the time bridge, bombs into the key of A flat and scarecrows are saying. Chorus 2, sweet cherub, 6, magical flat 7, 2, flat 2, which we've used a lot already, 1, and then do that sus thing. Sweet cherub, 6, flat 7, 2, flat 2, 1 with sus, then do that climb down to the ambiguous F5. Remember last time it was E5 that had that ambiguous climb down? That I said, even though it was a 5 chord, it implied minor because of that classic relative major minor things. But Mike made it ambiguous by landing on a dominant power chord, a 5 chord, not a dominant, a 5 chord. 5 chord means there's no major, there's no minor in this, there's no third at all in this chord. So this suspense interlude is familiar, and this time we have 2 bars of 4 and then 1 bar of 6, and then it goes into 2 bars of like an Exotica percussion interlude or transition. A percussion break 2 is what I called it, to go back into what I'm calling verse reprise. Man, Mike really went to town on this arrangement. Listen to this fantastic arrangement, because what verse reprise is a combination of the verse kind of mashed together with that time bridge. And the verse reprise, instead of starting on F sharp 7, it starts on F sharp major 7. And instead of going down to F major 7, goes down to F7. So it kind of reverses that major 7 and dominant, which instead of, as before, it was this time it's this. Let's hear what this verse reprise sounds with the guitar chords from Chris. Remember I said there was only one verse, and this is what I'm calling verse reprise. So if we recall the verse in B minor, it was save me, the heavens have opened, the storm is over, so let's stop that was the verse. Now on this verse reprise, we have the same lyrics kind of repeating 3 times, but it's different than this B minor, F sharp over A sharp to A minor. Instead, we take a similar stance that time bridge did, but we mix that up and go F sharp major 7. Save me, the heavens have opened, I'm coming home, sweet charity. So yeah, we invoke the feeling of the verse and the same direction of the melody, but instead of saying, save me, the heavens have opened, the storm is over, it says, save me, the heavens have opened, I'm coming home, sweet charity. So that's a great way to make a variation on a part that, tricks the listener's ear that they're hearing the same part again. Like, oh, this is just the verse. No, it's not. It's actually just not the verse. You just thought it was because it started the same way. And ears are very easy to trick in that regard, that you put something that it's already familiar with and then you kind of meander off the path and you might not notice it. Is a very strange progression. I am actually calling us still in G. I told you before it's going to be not really fit. F sharp major 7 is not in G. F7 is only the flat 7. E flat is the flat 6. That's wrong. Flat 6 of G, and then D is the 5. So this almost reminds me of the Andalusian cadence, which is that thing that goes like G minor, F major, E flat, right? It's almost the same as that. Instead of going to G minor, we go to F sharp major 7, F7, like... Yeah, really strange progression that is still loosely in G major, even though there is some heavy non-diatonicism here, and that E flat should be called flat 6. There's a mistake there on the penmanship. No, there's a mistake in the chord transcription on my part, sorry. So percussion break 2 leads us to verse reprise. Anyway, yeah, it sneaks out of, just like it did before in that time bridge, to the key of A flat by just quickly throwing in a D flat to D flat 7 right after a D, and we suddenly kind of change keys. The Pandiatonicism or whatever, it's what it sounds like. It's very harmonically loose or slutty at this point. And when it goes to this home free, it really gives the feeling that that's 1 to 6 in E flat major. And who's to say that it's not, except that by the time it goes to the chorus, we are clearly not in E flat major, but we're rather in A flat major. So I called this an A flat major because you can justify having an E flat and a C minor. It's not 1-6, it's 5-3 in A flat. So that's the easiest way to classify it, although the feeling is very much 1-6. I'm home free. So that's going into chorus 3 there after the part that I'm calling home free. And home free is 5 bars as well. Take a look back to the reverse reprise, and I want you to notice its song form of 5-5-5. I dare any of you, or challenge any of you, it's not really a dare, go find me a song that uses a 5-5-5 part in the song. So what do I mean by that? And again. So it's, in the cycle of 5, which adds intrigue, spiciness, variation to song forms, and it gives the listener's ear some place to move to. So it's all 5s, and then even the home free is 5. So it's 4 sets of 5 make up the verse reprise and then the home free section. So coming out of home free into chorus 3. Chorus 3 is pretty much the same as chorus 2. I'm home free. Do, 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 do. Chorus 3. Do, do. A set of 6 bars, then a set of 5 bars, then a set of 2 bars leads us to this modulation where we go up from F minor to up a whole step, kind of like an 80s modulation. I gotta say, if I had one, I'm not gonna say criticism of the song, I'm not sure I understand this modulation. Modulations in music can be very cheesy at times, and the 80s was a great example of those modulations, and we love those modulations where it goes up a whole step. I'm not sure what the purpose of that was in this song. I don't hate it. I don't absolutely love it. But at the end of chorus 3, it goes suddenly up a whole step. Sweet cherub time. So that I'm not sure what the point is of that modulation up a whole step. Maybe, they use that. I haven't scoured the soundtrack for that movie, Sweet Charity from 1969, the Bob Fosse movie. Maybe there's some modulation like that, but it almost sounds a little more like one of those 80s modulations that suddenly goes up a whole step. So it's not the end of the world. And then the song fades out, and that's about it. But very strange chord progression, extremely strange song form with just lots of odd groupings of bar numbers. Lots of non-4. In fact, I think there's less 4 than anything else if I count. And that's not a feature you can find of many songs, that most of the groupings aren't some set of 4. And the last thing I want to show you is a harpsichord part. I'm pretty sure they use a harpsichord. It could be a clavinet. It credits on the album that there's a bass clavinet. I think there's a harpsichord in there on the chorus. And Mr. Bungle always used harpsichords in a really nice way. Whether it's on, the Secret Song, or which comes, hidden after Carrie Stress in the Jaw. There's that kind of lo-fi espionage harpsichord. And Mr. Bungle always had a really cool way of using these kind of lo-fi harpsichord sounds. But this one is really blended in the chorus. I think it's doing a dissonant voicing, although I can't really tell. If I'm in chorus 2, it's like, sweet cherub, and it's not playing that. I'm just saying, sweet cherub time. something like. And that's a close voicing of F minor. If you wonder what I'm doing there, it's F minor, I'm adding a 9. And in this case, a lot of times dissonances aren't good, but harpsichord kind of holds a cool dissonance sound sometimes. I can't tell if that's what it is 100%, but it sounds like something like Sweet Charity. Or, I'm not sure. Sweet Charity. And it's hard to tell even what's doing that little sus4 to resolve thing there. Is it the harpsichord and the piano, or is it just the piano? The main thing, though, is they take that F minor and do some kind of... So if F minor add 9, really cool voicing for F minor. That would be the more pretty way to voice it. Would be the minor third of F, then the 5, and then 9 up there. But if you want to add some tension, put the 9 and the minor third right next to each other. Or minor, add 9. Always a cool thing. When you do minor 7 and 9, it's always more of a jazzy kind of sound. A cool sound too, but leaving out 7 is really cool. So great use of harpsichord there. It's not a real front and center type of thing in the track, but very cool nonetheless. Thanks a lot for watching this video and taking an interest in my channel. Please help me reach a larger audience by hitting subscribe below and ringing the notification bell. Check out my video playlist page to find the categories that most interest you. Leave me a super thanks here on YouTube, and even better, come join my Patreon. Please consider buying music for my original projects ISS and High Castle Teleorchestra. Also, don't forget to sign up for my email list on the front page of timsmolens.com. You can find information about all of those things in the description below. Thanks again.